For moderating this session, please allow me to invite Veronica Vallangos. She is the Inclusive Green Finance co-chair, and she is a deputy director in the Banco Central in Philippines. Thank you very much, dear Veronica, for being here today. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Laura. The last question, the last Menti question is indeed a good segue for this technical session. Now, again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants of this technical session on green taxonomies and green index. The topic of this session is not only timely, but equally important to the growing central bank members of the Alliance of Financial Inclusion, which are embarking into inclusive green finance. As we know, there is no standard agreed definition of green finance, that it necessitates taxonomies in various countries and regions. Different approaches to define green taxonomies can be found across different jurisdictions. At the same time, a measurement framework to capture the extent of green data remains desirable. Specifically, this session will cover different approaches of establishing a green taxonomy or a green definition. This will focus on the role of financial regulators as a key player in defining and implementing a broader green definition that can be easily adopted by the financial sector, greater industry players, financial institutions, individuals, and small and medium enterprises. We will then move to a discussion on how to measure inclusive green finance through an innovative tool called Green Index 3.0, which was developed by the Green, Inclusive, and Climate Smart Finance Action Group of the European Microfinance Platform. This index is meant to support the inclusion of environmental performance into the strategy, processes, risk management, as well as products development and disbursement for inclusive financial institutions. Now, throughout this session, let us underscore the key experiences, main learnings, opportunities, as well as challenges raised by each speaker to serve as guide in our own journey to inclusive green finance. This session will start with brief presentations from our three distinguished speakers. After the three presentations, we will proceed to the two rounds of conversation. Of course, we will allow questions from participants in the third round of conversation. Now, to introduce our first presenter, Ms. Suraya Sani. She's a deputy director from Bank Negara Malaysia. Suraya has over 12 years of experience in financial sector supervision with the Bank Negara Malaysia. She has been instrumental in the development of the climate change and principles-based taxonomy, and is part of the team in Bank Negara Malaysia that is driving the climate change agenda in the financial sector. Suraya?
Yes, Veronica. Thank you, Veronica. I'm very delighted to be able to participate in this fireside chat today. I hope everyone is safe and well. It is quite an interesting time to be discussing on this topic, green taxonomies and green index. There is a keen public awareness and regulatory push globally to weigh in the green agenda more strongly in the recent COVID-19 crisis response. So we are at the focal point to restore critical economic activities, and green should be taken into consideration. The climate change and principle-based taxonomy discussion paper was issued by Bank Negara Malaysia in December 2019. Working to refine the paper, and hopefully we will be issuing the paper soon. The principle-based taxonomy is only one of the building blocks of Bank Negara Malaysia on this journey towards a greener economy. Bank Negara Malaysia adopts a principles-based approach to promote channeling of financial flows to activities in low carbon sectors and promote decarbonization of existing industries. As you can see on the slide, the taxonomy actually outlines 5 guiding principles for the assessment of economic activities, namely activity that supports climate change mitigation, activities that support climate change adaptation, activities that do no significant harm to the environment, business operations that demonstrate immediate efforts to promote transition, and business operations must not be involved in illegal or prohibited activities. These guiding principles recognize the importance to adequately manage climate-related risks and support green transition. Next slide, please. In contrast to other taxonomies that identify a specific activity or business as green or adopt binary assessment of green and green, this principles-based taxonomy actually recommend or assess the willingness of businesses to improve practices and take into consideration the actions taken by businesses. Based on the 5 guiding principles, economic activities can be classified into 6 categories. The category 1 is the standard that businesses should aspire to achieve, where the economic activity of the business supports climate change mitigation or adaptation and do not pose significant harm to the wider ecosystem. For financial institutions, they are encouraged to play a nurturing role and promote transition to greener practices. So the progress of the transition to greener and more sustainable practices can be measured against several transition categories, namely the C2, C3, and C4. Underpinned by the philosophy of financial inclusion and being cognizant of the strong need to meet the funding requirements of businesses, in particular the less sophisticated small and medium-sized players, Bank Negara actually takes the view that the taxonomy must incentivize and encourage nurturing to facilitate smooth transition to a climate resilient and low carbon economy. Let's move on to the next slide on the challenges. So to come up with a taxonomy was not an easy task for us. One of the key challenges faced is the huge knowledge gap. Given that central bankers' tacit knowledge are mainly in finance and accounting, it was not easy to come up with a climate taxo, which is usable and able to support the Paris Agreement's long-term temperature goal of 2 degrees increase in global average temperature pre-industrial levels. So this is something that I think globally we are working towards achieving this goal. In addition, climate-related risk management is a new field for many institutions in Malaysia. However, given the urgency and the importance of managing climate change, we continue to build our capacity and technical knowledge. Engagement with experts and industry players very critical. Balancing competing needs is another challenge that requires careful consideration. There is a need to support transition while addressing the needs of business and the society. In addition, alignment to internationally accepted standards is also critical. On this, it will also require change in mindset and actions. That's all from me. I'm happy, So in terms of recommendation in developing taxonomy, what I would really recommend is to align to national climate strategies, contextualize to local economic and social structures, identify climate objective principles, relevant sectors, users, and close collaboration required government agencies, regulators, industry players, NGOs, and experts. So I think that's all from me for now. Happy to take questions from the audience. Thank you. Back to Veronica.
Thank you, Soraya. The next presentation will be from Ms. Nomindari Engtun, who currently serves as Chief Executive Officer of the Mongolian Sustainable Finance Association. Now, the association is a special mandated NGO that aims to bring together various financial sector players to direct investments for real growth in sustainable development. She also joined the UN Joint Sustainable Development Goals Fund in March 2020 as portfolio management consultant with the main role of supporting a portfolio of 40 countries in Asia, Europe, Middle East, and Africa in their implementation and monitoring of SDG financing focused joint programs. Nomindari, please.
Thank you, Veronica. And just checking in to see if you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can hear you clearly, Nomindari. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. And also for the presentations, just wondering if Laura or someone's going to share it, or if you want me. Okay.
Yeah, we will share it from.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you again also for the organizers for inviting us to this important discussion today. The Mongolia Green Taxonomy is really a joint collaboration between the Financial Regulatory Commission, the Central Bank, and also the local financial sector represented by the Mongolian Sustainable Finance Association. So it's really a pleasure for us to talk about our experience, some of the lessons learned, and also challenges that we have encountered in our taxonomy journey. So as Veronica already mentioned in the intro section of the discussion, and also it was, I think, already highlighted in the survey, the key driver of developing the Mongolia Green Taxonomy, very similar to other countries, really came from the need to have a nationally agreed classification framework of activities that we could consider green, and then we could consider also eligible for green financing. So clearly the main objective was to provide a really common language and approach around identifying green financing projects, and also mitigate the risks of greenwashing, to boost investor confidence in these types of investments, help scale up the various financial sources that are going into the green projects, and also very importantly provide a good framework to track existing green financing flows, because we knew this was already happening. A lot of interest in the banking sector was going into this area, and development of the green loans were increasing, but we really didn't have a specific number that we can report on. So next slide, please. So as for the application of the Mongolia Green Taxonomy, obviously the primary users are really defined as financial institutions like banks, since the Mongolian financial sector is pretty much dominated by banking. Almost 90% of the financial sector comes up as consisted of banks. But also learning from the Chinese taxonomy experience, we aim to design the taxonomy in a way that it would also apply to the entire financial sector, including the capital market, bond issuers, insurance companies, microfinance institutions, and so on. And in addition, we believe the taxonomy is a really good reference document for industries and companies as well, verification providers, standard setting institutions, as well as policymakers who are looking at really introducing standards, labels, incentives, and regulations to support green finance and green industry development in general. So next slide, please. And in terms of the overall process to develop the green taxonomy, you can see from here, it took us around a year. We started to work in late 2018 with the support and technical assistance from Tsinghua University, Dr. Majun's team. And the document itself was finalized in December 2019. And it was approved by the Financial Stability Commission of Mongolia, which consists of the heads of the Central Bank, the Financial Regulatory Commission, and the Ministry of Finance, basically covering all the key regulators and policymakers in the financial sector. Next slide, please. And in addition to the financial authorities, you can also see here that the Ministry of Environment also played a very critical role in the development of this document and provided all the technical input that was needed. And you can also see from the slide here, a wide range of stakeholders, both from the public and the private sector, were engaged in the development and the consultation process of this document. So the drafting of the document itself probably took us only 2 to 3 months, but then having consultations, receiving feedbacks on it, agreeing on the eligibility criteria and activities included took us quite some time. Next slide, please. And when we drafted the taxonomy framework, we also defined a set of kind of overarching principles that we think should govern the development and also the implementation of the taxonomy. And I think it was very important for us to build a foundational understanding among the stakeholders of the objectives of the taxonomy and how this should be implemented. So first, we wanted to make sure that the Mongolia taxonomy really targeted national policies and commitments made under this Paris Agreement. Second, we also wanted to make sure the taxonomy addresses the key sustainability challenges of the country. And these issues can be, of course, very different from country to country. In the Mongolia example, we have a huge air pollution issue that comes from the burning of raw coal in the winter season. And also, since Mongolia is still a developing country, we also have primary needs to improve the livelihoods of our people, especially among the lower income population, also making sure they have access to things like affordable housing, clean water, proper sanitation services, and so on. So we had to keep in mind these type of also social issues as co-benefits, although the taxonomy primarily targets green development and climate impact. And in addition, obviously, the taxonomy had to cover high emitting and key economic sectors that were already identified in key policies targets, such as the NDCs. And I think the previous presenter also mentioned that it was important for us that we aligned it with international practices, such as existing taxonomies like the EU taxonomy, the Climate Bonds Initiative taxonomy, since most of the Mongolian financial institutions were also interested in accessing more green capital from outside sources, such as the Green Climate Fund and DFIs. So we wanted to make sure our activities are more or less also aligned with international investor standards. And last but not least, obviously, the sustainability and the green finance space is really evolving on a daily basis. So we recognize that the taxonomy had to be a living document, and we agreed that it will be updated and improved every 3 years. So next slide. And this slide here shows really a stock take of the 4 types of general approaches and international best practices that we have reviewed when we drafted the Mongolia framework. We basically looked at broad conceptual definitions of green projects and green finance, legislative approaches like the EU taxonomy, more market-led standards from the CBI, the green bond principles, and also definitions and frameworks of financial institutions like IFC and FMO. And from our observation, we really think existing taxonomies are largely similar, but also have certain inconsistencies depending on country and institutional strategies. And we believe that while it's important to harmonize different standards across countries and borders, at the same time, we believe countries also should have a certain flexibility to design the taxonomies in a way that would meet the country's unique needs. And I'll give a little bit more examples on how we did this in the coming slide. So next slide, please. And here on this slide, you can see the general kind of 8 broad categories of the Mongolian taxonomy. So we have clean energy, energy efficiency, green building, pollution prevention, waste, water, and agriculture and transportation as the key categories, which is, I think, more or less consistent with some of the other international best practices as well. And you can see also here a very small screenshot of the taxonomy itself. And it really provides 3 levels of categorization. So first one, the main taxonomy category, the second, the sectors and the subsectors that come under it. And then third, a couple of examples of technologies and projects that are eligible under each category. So next, please. And this is the slide to show you, just to give you an idea of the activities that were added to our taxonomy that are very specific to Mongolia's context and development needs. So for example, we have categories for clean heating appliances and eco toilets that aims to reduce air and soil pollution in the country. We also have categories for sustainable pasture management and sustainable cashmere production to combat the land degradation and also desertification issues which result from Mongolia's nomadic culture and also the vulnerable climate condition that we have. Next, please. And after the approval of the taxonomy in 2019, the central bank has started collecting green loan statistics in the banking sector in accordance to the taxonomy. And here in the slide, you can see the 2020 green loan overview of Mongolian banks that was just recently issued by the central bank. So according to the statistics, we estimate that around 3% of the existing banking sector loan portfolio could be considered green. Next, please. In terms of the application of the taxonomy, we are working on various initiatives, both at the institutional and also the product level, to pilot various green financing mechanisms and solutions. And one flagship project of ours is the establishment of the Mongolia Green Finance Corporation, which is basically institution that has the vision to transition into a national green bank in the future. But at the moment, it's a public-private partnership-based financial institution with a non-bank financial institution status, but with a special mandate to promote only green finance. And on this project, we are working with local banks, the government of Mongolia, and also the Green Climate Fund. And we just recently accessed $27 million from GCF. And with this initial startup capital, we are hoping to basically provide affordable wholesale funding to local banks that can use those funds to on-lend to green projects focusing on energy efficiency, air pollution reduction, and green housing. Next, please. Apart from this institutional level kind of project, we are also working on the design and testing of a couple of green financial products in various sectors, also including green microfinance products. And one example of this is a collaboration that we have with GIZ on affordable and energy efficient housing pilot project that aims to basically test the entire value chain related to energy efficient housing finance, from the design of the house to the energy audit that needs to be conducted after the borrower takes the mortgage and lives in the house for a year. And on this program, GIZ, for example, is providing a 20% down payment subsidy to incentivize the low-income households to buy energy efficient houses and take on the mortgages. Next slide, please. So while we were able to successfully launch a taxonomy in Mongolia, obviously we also faced and are still facing many challenges. But the approach that we took was to really start with something very simple, a basic taxonomy, test it and improve it along the road as the market and policy makers get more experience. And here on this slide, we just grouped some of the key challenges that we encountered in the process. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into each of these in detail, but to just highlight some of the key ones. From the technical side, the key challenge was really the limited availability of data, local industry standards. For example, in Mongolia, we don't still have a green building code or a nationally agreed certification scheme. So it was very difficult for us to define which international standard or scheme we would reference in this document as the eligibility criteria. From the strategic perspective, the most difficult thing was, I think, as many people also mentioned in the survey, was to come to an agreement on the priorities and the boundaries of the taxonomy. When you involve a wide range of stakeholders in the process, all parties have different interests that they want those to be reflected in the taxonomy. So coming to a common understanding and balancing the development and also the sustainability goals were probably the biggest challenge for us. And another institutional barrier very specific to our country was that we don't have a super financial regulator. So identifying the owner of the taxonomy who would approve this and have the responsibility to regularly update this was another challenge. So the Mongolian Sustainable Finance Association played an important coordinating role in this. So next slide, please. And to further support now the implementation of the taxonomy, the central bank is currently in the process to develop more detailed green loan reporting guidelines. And for us, the next very important step is also to work on the development of industry-specific criteria that would support the implementation of the taxonomy. We also need to develop impact assessment tools for financial institutions, verification standards, and also conduct a lot of trainings for banks and other financial institutions and project developers to really support the successful implementation of the taxonomy. Next, please. And in this last slide here, you can see a step-by-step approach based on the Mongolia experiences that we developed just for the consideration of countries that are starting on the taxonomy journey. And we are very happy to share more information about this and also to listen to any suggestions and feedback on how we can better work on the implementation side. But that's it for my presentation today. And thank you very much for listening. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Nomindari, for that comprehensive presentation. Last, but certainly not the least, will be the presentation by Dr. Davide Forcella. He is the head of the Green, Inclusive, and Climate Smart Finance Action Group at the European Microfinance Platform, head of Business Development and Green Inclusive Finance in Yapo Solutions, and associate researcher in green inclusive finance at the Center for European Research in Microfinance. Davide's key expertise is in supporting the inclusive finance sector and its financial services providers in the definition and operationalization of environmental strategies, the development and implementation of indicators to assess and manage climate vulnerability and ecosystems, negative impacts and their inclusion in loan process and risk management, the selection and financing of green technologies and practices, and the adaptation and development of specific green products and services. Davide?
Thanks a lot, Veronica, for the very kind introduction, and thanks to all of you to have me here. It's a great honor, first of all, to be the last one and be men. So because we very much believe in the linkages between women and green inclusion. And second, because it's very much honor to be have the possibility to present you what we have done so far in our group. Yeah, maybe 2 words on the introduction on the Green Inclusive Finance and Climate Smart Finance Action Group. So it is a group built by various actors in the inclusive finance world. And this is a unique think tank that has been formed in 2013 in Berlin. Yeah? Our main objective is to discuss challenging strategies, enhance knowledge of the sector, foster action and cooperation, and in particular, to develop common standard and understanding on what green inclusive finance is, as well as how to measure it, yeah, and how to develop it further. Maybe a key topic here, and you will see then after in the next slide, is that our composition in terms of stakeholders of the group is about, you know, a very multivariate set of actors. So we have investors, private investors, we have a network of financial institutions, we have consultants, we have international institution representatives, etc. So all institutions that are involved, yeah, to develop further this sector. Can you go a second bit in the previous slide, please? Yeah, so some of the achievement we had so far is basically has been our dissemination on best practice in green inclusive finance, yeah, in terms of event, in terms of training, in terms of scientific committees, publication and e-learning on this topic, and in particular on what I'm going to tell you now today about this green index, and I will let you know in a second what it's about. For the past year and the present year, we have quite a full agenda, among which it has been mentioned already a couple of times is the development and the finalization of the Green Index 3.0. So the third version of this Green Index, I will tell you in a second, as well as together with the Social Performance Task Force, answer is the development of the universal standard for environmental performance aligned to the universal standard for social performance. We have an online library, yeah, where basically we're collecting all information about green inclusive finance that is public available by everyone. It will be available on the website in a couple of weeks. We are mapping projects that also this map will be available in a couple of weeks, a month on the website. Yeah. We are publishing by end of this summer a state of the art of where the sector is. I will show you some preliminary results. And we have a bi-weekly webinar series, ongoing training to our stakeholder, as well as we are working quite intensively to develop an ongoing events to match demand and supply for green finance. Please, next slide. So this slide, we already introduced it. So the action group is coordinated by myself and Natalia, that is not present here, so because we trust in gender equality as well. Next slide, please. So as I thought to put here to start my speech, a definition, a working definition that has been used in the action group to define green inclusive finance. Yeah, as said, I totally agree with you. There is not a unique definition, but we have been found this is a definition that has been used in the last years and that's been, result quite interesting. So we define green inclusive finance, as consisting in risk management processes, financial product and non-financial services as part of a financial offer, and the environmental strategy and monitor system. So you see it's multidimensional. Yeah, of course, the key topic is to finance green transition, but with a set of processes and risk management tool within a specific strategy and monitor system that support, first of all, economic opportunities and needs of household, micro, small, medium-sized enterprises. By economic opportunities, you mean something that can generate higher revenue, for example. And by needs, you can interpret both, if there is a demand, I'm in need of that, as well, I'm require this support because I have a risk that I need to mitigate, for example, a climatic risk, partially excluded by the standard banking sector. In a clean, clean means do not degrade the ecosystem. Resilience, means building resilience is for the end population as well, so for the end client as well as for the institution. In sustainable manner, normally we interpret both on the point of view economic sustainability for the financial institution, as well as social and environmental. Please, next slide. Of course, this topic is a bit, multidimensional. And since we started working into that, we say, okay, good, we need to have an index to measure the progress of the sector and also to create awareness raising, as you very correctly mentioned in the pool. Yeah. So the Green Index, next slide, has been built by, next slide is fine, good. Has been built, being built in 2014 by the Green Inclusive and Climate Smart Finance Action Group. So you see it is already 7 years. And the idea, I think I'm very, very excited to be discussing with you because we have been taking a bit the other way around approach. So we have been trying, when developing that, there was already some various activities, both at the research level as well as the consulting level, as well as microfinance institution work, experimenting already back in time, since 2010, etc., various green approach. And we have been trying to not be normative, but rather try to look what the financial institutions are doing, and then try to help them to shape how that could be part of a coherent picture that then can eventually become an index, and then build on this index, because it's based on what has been happening already on the ground. Other financial institutions can comply with it, can like it and learn from the others, and then slowly evolving toward international standards. So it has been a work from top down. Yeah. So next slide, please. Voila, this is a bit the journey and the story about the Green Index. The first version has been developed in 2014. We call 1.0. Yeah. It was already back in time included into an audit indicator called the SPI4 for the social audit as a new optional dimension, and was already back in time from our members like MIVs, investor as well as MFI, a tool that has been used to measure their environmental performance. We already knew when we developed that for the first time, 2014, that we were supposed to do a 2.0 because we wanted to test how that was working. Again, was based on 5 years of research, this 1.0. But then once we put in the ground, we said, okay, we need now to see how it was working. And so we developed in 2016 a second version that was based basically on 2 year implementation by various members of the action group, as well as we were working back in time with the mixed market that was collecting together with us information of between 80 and 100 microfinance institutions that were telling us, okay, what did they like, what they didn't like, what they find useful for decision taking, what is easy to report. And so based on this feedback, we designed a new indicator that was a 2.0 and was including already quantitative metrics. So how many green loans you're disbursing. And now this year, 2021, after six years, based on quite some experience, we developed the third version that has some news. One is the inclusion of climatic vulnerability as a key dimension that was not so present so far in the previous version. That was more protecting ecosystem, the topic. Here instead is a full-fledged approach, including, of course, the reduction of climatic vulnerability of the client. We based that on a lesson learned in the last 6 years implementation. In particular, we have been looking toward or around 1,000 plus environmental performance assessment has been done by our members in the last, from 2011 and 2019 to see what was the lesson learned there. We've been starting doing, surveys with MIVs, with microfinance investment vehicles, as well as looking around for all the relative international initiatives to align the new version to the international initiatives like the European taxonomy. And then, of course, we have been aligned that with what we are developing as the universal standard for social performance with SPTF. Next slide, please. So here we don't need to look into that in the detail. It's just to let you know that there was quite a lot of activity in the last 6 years in particular, with a lot of projects. You will see Ecomicro, for example, with Inter-American Development Bank, was working with more than 30 microfinance institutions in Latin America. The MABA project with the United Nations for Environment was working with more than 40 financial institutions for more than 8 years. So based on all these projects and understanding of our members, we developed this 3.0. Next slide, please. Voila, so this is basically is the picture. There is a Green Index 3.0. I'm going to tell you just the main guidelines, yeah, and is aligned to what we call the Dimension 7 Universal Performance for a social performance. That is basically the reduced version of the 3.0, is a more simplified one and more easy to handle, while the 3.0 already go quite in some detail on the various topics. Next slide. Voila, this is basically how the Green Index is built, as well as the Dimension 7 for universal standard universal performance. You will see below is still a work in progress, because we are starting now a first feedback round, yeah, from expert. Yeah, we will be pleased to include our colleague from AFI, and then a second feedback round more broadly, where everyone here present or also beyond the member of AFI will be very happy to receive your feedback, yeah, to make the Green Index as adapted to the needs and collecting all the feedback by all the stakeholders that could be interested in. As of now, it's based on 4 standards. You will see the 7.0 is environmental strategy and leadership. Yeah, it assesses, if an institution has a strategy, yeah, if it has people and roles into the institution that is leading the strategy and is responsible of the strategy. And then it assesses about if there is a monitoring in place. So are institutions able to monitor on the progress on this strategy, the achievement of the objective, and along 3 main dimensions? Capacity to disburse loan, capacity to reduce vulnerability of the client, and capacity to reduce vulnerability on the ecosystem. Then we have a 7A that is about the identification of vulnerability. Yeah, by vulnerability, we mean a multidimensional vulnerability, yeah, to climate change, to ecosystem degradation, as well as, for example, to energy poverty. Yeah, the client or financial institution are affected by these threats, and the idea is that is the institution able to assess this threat? Yeah, indirect means the client, indirect means the institution. Yeah, is the institution potentially affected by some climatic disaster, like a flood? Yeah, it's near a river, some branch that could be affected. And then the other side of the coin is the adverse environmental impact. There instead we meant the impact that could have the financial institution activity. So this is a direct one, yeah, or its client, the indirect part, so the portfolio of the financial institution, on the ecosystem, like land degradation, water, air pollution, emission of greenhouse gases. The 7B instead taking into account about the capacity of the institution to manage such risk. You identify vulnerability and adverse impact. Now, does the institution has in place processes that can, first of all, include such risk into their, into their credit process, taking decision out of that, and eventually having processes to offset certain of these risks. For example, by suggesting specific products to offset certain risk. And then the 7.C is about the green product and services. So exactly the part of financing that, where we divide it into 2. One is the green loans, specifically the institution has loans to support the green transition. We used to divide them in 4 categories: clean energy and energy efficiency, sustainable agriculture by nature-based solution, ecosystem-based adaptation solution, like cyclic economies, like waste management and recycling, for example, and wash and sanitation. And then the 7C2 is about that institution has other financial services, non-credit, for example, microinsurance for climate or production risk, or non-financial services such as training and technical assistance to the client. Next slide, please. Voila, when you fill the green index, something like that appear. Yeah, you have a scoring along the 4 standards that is telling to the institution or to the investor or potentially to the regulator looking into that, how the institution position it in the 4 standard. And you can compare them with benchmark at the level of country, region, or for example, legal status or size. Yeah? Next slide. You also have the possibility to look into other metrics. You could maybe have a look more into the risk view. So you can segment the results into, okay, what are the capacity of the institution to manage the indirect risk, so like environmental impact and vulnerability of the clients, yeah, or the direct risk, yeah, so the one that the institution per se is exposed through its operation, as well as to identify and manage the vulnerability and adverse environmental impact. So you can have a view about risk management in the 2 sides, vulnerability and ecosystem impact, or more on opportunity level. Yeah, how is progressing in green loans or green non-financial products is able to monitor the advancement on the disbursement of such loan and is able to correctly identify the opportunity to finance green transition. Next slide, please. Voila, in summary, I think it's very nice to see how you were working through the classification, the taxonomy. We used to see, I mean, when the financial institution we work through approach green inclusive finance, typically used to see the green product in 3 ways. One is an economic opportunity that has to do with the demand, yeah, increase client's value, decrease client cost, yeah, or satisfying client needs. And another one is the reduction of vulnerability. So inclusion, you know, this is fostering social inclusion because you decrease the vulnerability of the client and decrease portfolio client vulnerability, for example, to climate change. And the other one, the dimension is that the product could protect ecosystem. Yeah, of course, decrease pressure on ecosystem. That are the 3 aspects of a product. So you will see indeed when you finance green product and services, as we see from our side, you cooperate with 3 main items: reduce client vulnerability, reduce adverse impact on ecosystem, increase production and quality of revenue, and like that fulfill environmental strategy. And if you reread now the 4 dimension of the 4 standard of the green index, basically it allows the green finance that you're looking through a green taxonomy to progress on the overall picture of green inclusive finance, so the 1st standards. Next slide, please. So a couple of lessons learned, because one of the challenges, as you said correctly, there is a problem of data. Yeah, we have been looking into data in our case from financial institution from 2011 2019, and we have been running quite data set analysis to homogenize the various environmental assessment done on the line of the Green Index 2.0, because when we did was not done the 3.0 yet. And these are some results. Yeah. So you will see, we will not, next slide, please. We will not have time, of course, to do in detail, but we have quite, so based here on 600 plus environmental assessment of MFIs worldwide. I think as of now, we have between 1,000, maybe 1,200. Yeah. You will see the level of scoring. Yeah. The Green Index can score between 0 to 100%. The average score institution has. You can see what are the strengths of the various institutions. So you will see that we have identified at least in the last 10 years, 350 MFIs. Here you see 33% because the data set is not complete, but up to 350 or more MFIs that has been engaged in disbursing green loans. And here you see what are the highest interesting activity, like exclusion list to do not affect ecosystem, have a green policy, have a clean energy products are among the highest, sustainable agriculture product, or environmental training. One important thing of the work I was doing with Inter-American Development Bank back 5 years ago, we have been seen on a work of more than 300 MFI in Latin America that 60% declare that their clients are affected by environmental degradation and climate change that could affect up to 30% of their portfolio. Next slide, please. So we are, like, I will not want to go in detail, but we have quite an interesting data set built on this information, where you can segment this analysis per region. You see Africa, Latin America, Asia, etc. For legal status, like bank, non-bank financial institution, cooperatives, NGO. As well, you can start checking along the various standards, the evolution, for example, per region. And here we see, for example, the evolution of Africa that has been increasing particularly for disbursement of green loans for clean energy. Next slide, please. Voila. Last but not least, I would like to take the last 2 minutes that you give me. Sorry for speaking so much. To tell you about an actual implementation that we have been doing. This is within YAPU about supporting green transition. This is a project called Microfinance for Ecosystem-Based Adaptation. Next slide. Is a project supported by, basically, it's a project owned by United Nations for Environment and supported by the Ministry of Environment of Germany. And the objective was to increase the capacity of microfinance institutions to finance ecosystem-based adaptation, basically support better agricultural finance that could reduce climatic impact and protect ecosystem while increasing the revenue for the client. Here you see some of the practice and technology that have been financed: agricultural support, organic agriculture, crop diversification, efficient irrigation, sustainable forest management, etc. And in the next slide, you will see, next slide, please. Voila, you will see some of the partners. First of all, an interesting thing about this project, what I would like to share with you, that has been started as a total grant project in 2012, 2017, yeah, in 2 countries in Latin America with 5 microfinance institutions for 4 million euro by the German government, by the German Ministry of Environment. But then has been evolving to phase 2, and that would have been a very interesting evolution with just 25% of the budget, but there we were able to collect up to 50% of private support by the institutions that are listed here. They were co-financing the implementation of the technical system to implement this project, as well as by some of the strategic partners you see on the left that are private actors like the BNP Paribas, the Crédit Agricole, the BBVA, so main private banks. They were supporting certain of these partner institutions to engage into this project, as well as Bancoldex is a local bank in Colombia. And finally, you see in 2020-2021, we expanded the scope to include biodiversity conservation. And here you see a bit the progress. We start in phase 1 with 2 countries. We move in phase 2 with 9 countries. Now in 2020-2021, we are at 12 countries. And you see the number of MFIs participating. The project basically allows institutions to understand the climatic risk of their clients, to define what are the products that could offset this risk, and to check what are the existing practices and technology that they can finance, and developing a reporting system so that then they can report internally and to external stakeholders. In this case, YAPU in phase 2 and biodiversity platform. So the company I'm part of, it is a software company and a consulting company, is leading the implementation of phase 2 and biodiversity platform phase 3. Next slide, please. Voila, just a couple of words. This is a bit the result up to date of this example of implementation. There are many more, yeah, of green inclusive finance as we see. The benefit was a better ecosystem, increased productivity and quality, diversified income, less risk or loss due to weather events. And in particular, there has been disbursed, so there is typically a factor 1 to 6. There was like 5 million investment, and institution disbursed up to $30.5 million US invested in ecosystem-based solution, reaching around 18,000 smallholder farmers. Yeah? Next slide, please. This we don't need to read, but I just wanted to put here this long list to give you an idea of the approach I've been following to see what has been financed by the financial institutions that are partner of our members. Yeah, and then from there see what they mean by green. So there's been really this bottom-down approach. You will see clean energy efficiency. You can read technology already financed since like probably 10 years, as well the same thing for the sustainable agriculture or nature-based solution on ecosystem-based adaptation practices. I think last slide. This is like you can check maybe we have a couple of product catalog for energy and for sustainable agriculture. One is for the action group, the one on the left, and the one on the right is from the MEBA project, where there is technical cards about each one of these practices and technology, where there's a sort of a small taxonomy of what do they contribute in terms of generation of revenue, protection of ecosystem, mitigation of climate change, etc., etc. Next slide and last. And here you see an example, an example of classification we've been using, very practical, to classify, for example, the various sustainable practices and technology have been financed, for example, through MEBA in the last 8 years. And the classification is pretty simple, is along the 3 dimensions of green products. You know, from left to right is the capacity of these practices to increase revenue, yeah, potential income generation. From bottom to up, you will see the capacity of these practices to decrease vulnerability, so to increase resiliencies. And then the color, the light green, the medium green color, and the dark green is about the capacity to reduce greenhouse gas emission. Yeah, and with that, we've been conducting the financial institution to define what are the best product to finance according to, you know, a market review of providers, demand, etc., and align to the needs of the institution to reduce the risk and to protect the ecosystem. And with that, I think I'm done, if I'm not wrong. Yes. Thanks a lot for your kind attention. Sorry for having taken quite some time.
Yeah, thank you very much, Davide, Nomindari, and Soraya for your presentations. Let me now move to the first round of, I say as a conversation, because I want this to be much more informal, right? Now, I have 3 questions here, let's say for Soraya. How can regulators actually establish a coordination mechanism to establish a national green taxonomy? Who are actually the key stakeholders in the case of Malaysia?
Thank you for the questions, Veronica. Climate risk is a risk that no institutions or stakeholders can tackle alone. Working collaboratively is key, even so, in developing a taxonomy. In Malaysia, when we first started the work on taxonomy, we collaborated with the World Bank. The World Bank team had conducted benchmarking on the available tax source. In addition, they had actually linked us to the relevant agencies and institutions, which includes the NGOs. We had also engaged the government agencies and ministries, as well as selected financial institutions at that point of time. To ensure a more coherent approach, the refinement work on the taxonomy papers currently is being undertaken by the Joint Committee on Climate Change, Subcommittee 1, also known as the JC3 SC1. So JC3 is actually a regulatory industry platform co-chaired by Bank Negara Malaysia and Securities Commission Malaysia. The members include Bursa Malaysia and 19 industry players. Through this platform, the Bank and Securities Commission Malaysia work closely with the financial industry to drive and support efforts in the financial sector in managing climate-related risks and facilitating businesses to transition towards sustainable practices, including the work on the taxonomy and adaptation of the taxonomy. Coming back to your question on who are the key stakeholders, so based on our experience, the key stakeholders are the government agencies, financial players in the financial sectors, businesses, as well as NGOs. It is also highly recommended for institutions to be a member of global and regional networks such as AFI, NGFS, and many others, to actually learn and share best practices, as well as contribute to the development of climate risk management in the financial sector.
Thank you very much, Soraya, for that information. Now, for Nomindari, how do you measure the taxonomy progress in the case of Mongolia? What kind of data are you collecting or intending or planning to collect from your stakeholders?
Thank you, Veronica, for the question. And as I briefly mentioned in the presentation, so the main approach that we're taking right now is to collect green loan statistics from the banking sector through the central bank. And this has been, successfully piloted last year. And right now the central bank is looking at making the current kind of green loan statistics a bit more comprehensive and improving it a little bit to add also quantitative kind of information indicators on the impact side. So asking the banks what the GHG emission reductions or the energy savings or the water savings that you have achieved through your green transactions. And we are in discussion with the central bank on this, and we also realized that, I mean, these impact indicators that we'd like to collect from the banks should be very specific and different to each of the products. And definitely it's a very comprehensive process that we are trying to complete sector by sector. We just finished, for example, a Kashmir sector green loan criteria that has specific indicators. Last year, we also finished one on energy efficient housing, but we also need to develop it for the rest of the sectors that we have in the taxonomy. And very openly speaking, we do see a little bit of resistance from our member banks. And we really do understand also the point, because collecting this type of impact data from the clients takes a lot of technical expertise. It takes a lot of additional time and resources as well. And recognizing these barriers, what we're doing right now is to trying to access some readiness funds from the Green Climate Fund to develop a very comprehensive green financing training program for our financial institutions. So at least one person at the bank will have the technical knowledge to conduct emission reductions and reporting and calculations like that. And then we are also looking at developing sample sector-wide calculation and impact measurement tools, and also guidance documents to help really banks understand how banks and also microfinance institutions understand how they can conduct MRV on green loans. So that's the current approach that we are taking, but we do recognize that this space is still evolving, and then there's not really a set methodology to do this. So we're also looking for good experiences, examples from other countries. So happy to also hear from others on how this is being done.
Yeah, that's interesting, Nomindari. Now, for the video, you presented a comprehensive framework for measuring green data. My question is, what is actually the relevance of the green index for regulators? At least your perspective on this. How can they leverage on this tool? And what do you see as the main challenges or limitations of this tool?
Thanks a lot for the question. So I really see from the exercise you're going through and what you have been doing, really a lot of synergies and complementarity. What I think can bring to you is what basically has been done so far in a non-regulated way, from the inclusive finance sector, including microfinance institution as well as private investor. Will be basically aligned on this principle, to measure their environmental performance and to define their way forward. So it's sort of a look from you, okay, what normally are the microfinance institutions that you want to regulate, are doing, and how do they understand their green inclusive finance? I mean, not anyone will understand the full scope, but each one of them has contributed to one of the aspects basically of the green index. And that will be extremely interesting to see how it's possible to leverage on this experience from the ground and to bring to the regulation, and then also do the way around, how working together with you guys we can bring the regulator view to the institution that has already started since a while, acting on green. So we need to capitalize on what has been done and to fill the gap what has not been done, because was missing a clear guideline basically. So this I think is the highest added value, to really join forces with the same orientation and same objective we have, but with the two different perspectives. Now, what are the highest challenge? The challenge number one is that even if we've been working since a while on this topic and has been quite used, there is always a confusion of multi-tools out. And that's one of the key issue that we have been looking for. I mean, they've been observing. So there are various reporting tools, the various international initiatives, we have various private investors, each one is asking something similar, but not the same. And so this multidimensionality of tools for reporting and indicator is really a challenge that confuse and really generate a lot of operational work for the microfinance institution. Here on our side, from the action group, we are working now to do a full-fledged mapping between the green index and the various international initiatives that are developing or locally, so that then once one will report to the green index, we could also report potentially to other initiatives, so to support the financial institution to have to have potentially one tool. The other key problem, the other key challenge has been, and that's I think totally aligned with what we have discussed so far, is to make understanding to the various stakeholders what green means. Because if you go there and then you say, okay, the local central bank will think something, the private investor financing of one institution will think something similar but not the same, the financial institution will be different, and then this alignment between what green means and then what are the key actions to implement has been basically the main challenge. Many times when institutions just look to the green index, say, now I understand what green means. And now, okay, this thing I was already doing, but I was not reporting as green. Now I understand I would like to do these things, and now I see that I have a gap. Okay, now I can act upon that. It has been many times a tool rather than to measure performance, really to generate awareness and stimulate action on how institutions can capitalize on what already done and what they can do more according to their capacity and their strategy. I will stop here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Davide, for that insight. Now, in the interest of time, I will not move to the second round of conversation, but at this time, I'd like to invite questions from the participants, if there are any, to any of our speakers, please. I don't see any questions in the chat box. Okay, so let me end this session, this special session on green taxonomies and green index. I'd like to thank our distinguished panelists, Soraya, Nomindari, and Davide for that very comprehensive presentations. Thank you very much.